Like, we need to actually realize the jobs that we are creating need to be good jobs, and good jobs are union jobs. Good jobs are permanent, full-time jobs that create, the ability for people to be able to support themselves, not, little bits in here and there that you're trying to cobble together. So we need to make sure that those new jobs are good jobs, because we know that the union advantage is over $5 an hour. So the active ability to be able to unionize your workplace has to be a priority. The ability to be at a bargaining table without a government intervening in the bargaining process has to be a reality. No more 107, no more provincial government stepping on employees' toes, on workers' toes.
Welcome to Perspectives, a Canadian journal of political economy and social democracy. I'm Clement Nokos, editor of Perspectives Journal and director of policy at the Broadbent Institute. As U.S. Trump administration economic policies reshape decisions about jobs, industry, and investment, workers and communities in Canada are feeling the effects. From manufacturing to public services to war shock inflation, economic choices are being made that will shape the future of work on both sides of the border, often without workers at the table. So what does this mean for the labor movement? Leaders from Canada's major trade unions spoke with the Broadbent Institute's executive director, Jen Hassum, on stage at the 2026 Progress Summit. Comme événement bilingue, les sommets a mis en vedette des leaders du mouvement syndical des partis au Canada, y compris la présidente du Congrès du travail du Canada, Bea Bruske, la présidente de la Fédération des travailleurs travailleuses de Québec, Magali Picard, et le président du TUSA Canada, Sawyer. This panel was part of the Progress Summit's bilingual programming, with questions being answered in English and French by Canada's labour leaders. Speakers included Bea Bruske, President of the Canadian Labour Congress, Magali Picard, President of Quebec's FTQ, and Bea Sawyer, President of UFCW Canada. The discussion also turns to what Labour is fighting for: a different economic and trade future that puts workers and communities at the center, and the collective action needed to make that future real. They talk about what's at stake and how workers organize together to shape what comes next. Here's their conversation with Jen Hassum, recorded live from the 2026 Progress Summit.
We're just going to jump right into it. And the topic on purpose of this session is to be discussing the Trump economic era because it is reshaping so much. There are so many decisions that Canadians are faced with when it comes to jobs, industry, investment, public services, things that are impacting workers, communities, our culture. And Canada is feeling the effects of Trump's politics and his economic direction and choices that are being made. So what does this mean for the labor movement? What does this mean for Canadian workers? Opening question, over to you, Bea. Why does this moment with trade tensions, tariffs, political shifts in the United States, why does this matter for workers in Canada today?
It's an absolutely critical time for workers in Canada today. We are at an absolute turning point. For so many years and decades, we relied so heavily on trade with the U.S. Over 70% of our export goes to the U.S., and we've been so tightly integrated with the economics of the U.S. that it is creating a critical problem for us at this moment in time. So we need to decide whether or not we're going to continue the current way of our economic system, or if we're going to make a significant change. And workers need to be at the forefront of the change that we need to see to safeguard those jobs that we need right now.
Over to you, Barry.
Thanks, Jen. This directly impacts their employment as tariffs threaten to move jobs out of the country into low-wage jurisdictions, many of them non-union, where there's increasingly unsafe working conditions. It impacts the worker unity when workers see each other as adversaries, not as brothers and sisters. And the safety of their economic security erodes the working class consciousness and undermines working class unity. I want to give a quick example that recently happened to UFCW members, in that one company, Diageo, decided to close a plant near Windsor, Amherstburg, which bottles Crown Royal. Then Doug Ford in the Ontario government decides to retaliate against the American government.
Bring out the Crown Royal.
Because of the tariffs and the cost of the tariffs, and he dumps out the Crown Royal. Well, we now hear from workers in Gimli, Manitoba, and Valleyfield, Quebec, of saying, I'm not involved in this fight with Donald Trump, and now my livelihood, the potential of my, making money to make for my family, may be taken away because sales go down, shifts go down, hours go down, people get laid off. So it's directly impacting their life that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Et Magali, donc, ce moment actuel, pourquoi c'est important pour les travailleuses, travailleurs au Canada aujourd'hui?
Bien, c'est un moment charnière. Hein? Je pense qu'on parle beaucoup de Donald Trump, des tarifs, mais on doit aussi se dire que le passé ne reviendra pas. On ne reviendra pas, on ne fera pas marche arrière, on ne reviendra pas à ce qu'on a connu. Bea parlait, no, it's true, we're not going to go back.
Yeah.
Puis, je pense qu'il faut absolument penser différemment. Il faut travailler différemment. Il faut arrêter de prendre nos richesses naturelles. Le Canada est un endroit qui produit des richesses naturelles qui fait l'envie du monde entier. Il faut arrêter de prendre nos ressources, les envoyer pour une bouchée de pain aux États-Unis et partout dans le monde. Il faut investir. Ça prend de la deuxième, de la troisième transformation. Il faut que ça se passe ici. Il faut penser différemment. On ne reviendra pas en arrière. Donc, c'est ça l'avenir, vraiment. C'est là qu'il faut aller.
Et la deuxième question, c'est à vous aussi. Donc, lorsque vous parlez avec vos membres aujourd'hui, à ton syndicat et à les syndicats, comment les changements économiques se manifestent concrètement dans la vie quotidienne des Québécois, Québécoises?
Oui, bien, je viens de parler de changement, de penser différemment. C'est pas magique. Hein? Au Québec, c'est 166 000 emplois qui sont présentement soit proches d'être perdus ou qui vont l'être dans les prochaines semaines, prochains mois. Donc, c'est une incertitude, c'est de l'angoisse. Ce sont des familles partout dans les régions du Québec qui ne savent pas de quoi demain va ressembler. On ne peut pas juste dire on va vendre notre maison puis on va aller vivre en appartement. Les coûts des appartements sont plus élevés qu'une hypothèque actuellement. Le taux d'inflation, tout le monde est égorgé. C'est extrêmement difficile, la situation dans laquelle on vit. Alors, mais pour se sortir de ça, il faut qu'il y ait un plan. Et le plan, il faut que les travailleurs fassent partie du plan. Si on commençait à parler avec nos gens partout, dans les entreprises, dans les régions, ils vont être les premiers à nous dire ce qu'il faut faire pour être plus productif, plus efficace, pour être plus compétitif. Alors ça, c'est l'avenir. Il faut absolument établir un plan et le faire ensemble. Et si on réussit ça, bon, on va juste être plus fort. J'entendais le premier conférencier qui parlait d'acheter local. On va produire davantage. Donc oui, il y a de l'incertitude. Il va falloir travailler à avoir des services publics qui vont être capables de répondre à la commande. Ça va prendre un gouvernement, des gouvernements qui vont être là, bien sûr, pour investir et dire c'est pas le temps de parler d'économie puis de récession. Il faut que le Canada dépense plus que jamais pour que nos gens qui ont bâti le pays, qui tiennent l'économie du pays, soient encore au rendez-vous dans les prochains mois.
So, same question, over to you, Bea.
Sure. So the uncertainty that's facing workers right now, whether you're private sector, public sector, or working in the trades, is significant. It is very, very high. We see private sector employees working in forestry and steel and aluminum, in the auto industry and aerospace, and in so many different sectors, including food production, who are on the edge of their seats at all times about what is the next tweet that's coming out from the White House, and how is that going to impact my reality, how is that going to impact my workplace. And at the same time, we have a federal government cutting federal public service worker jobs, who all of us rely on, the very scientists that we rely on to make good decisions, the people who are actually, managing employment insurance claims, the people dealing with disability benefits, right? These are the very people that all of us are relying on who are also being cut at the same time. And, we have huge employers like Algoma Steel taking $500 million from our federal government and then turning around and cutting 1,200 jobs. How is that allowed to happen? It is hugely problematic. It is shameful. And so workers are under significant pressure and stress. They're deciding whether or not they can move, or if they move, what does that mean for their family? What does that mean for their communities? They're making decisions at the grocery store every single day about what they can or can't afford to buy. And it is really, really very, very stressful. So the uncertainty, coupled with the reality of what we've already seen, makes this a very, very fraught time for workers right across this country.
Over to you, Barry.
Yeah, it's showing up in all of our workplaces. There's the threat of tariffs, hurt Canadian productivity. Some cases it has led to reductions in shifts, reduction in hours, And a lot of the employers we talk to are either backing off or reducing their amount of investment into the Canadian workers. We're seeing it out west in the canola crushing plants. The American government has put tariffs on cars. The Chinese government has retaliated. The Canadian government has retaliated. Now there's new canola tariffs on canola going to China. And we have workers in those plants that are now on reduced shifts and having situations where they have half their work paid for work, half by EI. As Bea said, sometimes the EI claims are either not being processed at all or are being processed very slowly. That increases the mental strain and the internal pressure on these families who say, I don't know where my next paycheck's coming from, or I don't know if I'm getting a full paycheck or when I'm going to get this money. I don't know if I can afford groceries for my family.
Yeah. Well, what a rosy picture we're painting.
Well, I would just also mention that we have the highest youth unemployment rate that we've had in 15 years. So just to top that off as well, it is really a critically challenging time for us right now.
And it is so important to have these conversations because so often if you read the business sections, you see, well, market values are up and up and up, but what's happening in the real world is certainly not the case. So bigger picture, it feels like we're at a crossroads, which like Magali, you said so eloquently in the first answer. If labor is helping reshape the Canadian economy and the plan that we need to deal with the threat of the 51st day and the economic warfare that's being thrown at us, what is that picture? What needs to change? So over to you first, Barry.
Well, I'd say what success would look like is preparing the Canadian workforce for jobs of tomorrow. It means investing in our workers' training, in our health and safety, and making our industries in Canada more resilient to these economic shocks. Right? It means making workplaces more sustainable by investing in clean and renewable technologies and training workers. But most importantly, it means that workers have a seat at the table in trying to ensure our economic future. This means strong unions, where workers can participate in the decision-making arena and play a role in meeting the productivity needs of a growing and prosperous community. No one knows what it needs to make a Canadian business succeed more than the workers themselves.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I would add a few things. I agree completely with what Barry just had to say, but I also think Barry talked in this last section about the fact that we have many workers who are underemployed. Like, we need to actually realize the jobs that we are creating need to be good jobs, and good jobs are union jobs. Good jobs are permanent, full-time jobs that create, the ability for people to be able to support themselves, not, little bits in here and there that you're trying to cobble together. So we need to make sure that those new jobs are good jobs because we know that the union advantage is over $5 an hour. So the active ability to be able to unionize your workplace has to be a priority. The ability to be at a bargaining table without a government intervening in the bargaining process has to be a reality. No more 107, no more provincial government stepping on employees' toes, on workers' toes. Workers absolutely have to be at the decision-making table, not just consulted, but actually being there to make the decisions. Who knows better than a worker what's going on in their sector and in their workplace? Who knows better than a worker what is needed education-wise in order to actually move forward within that particular sector, right? And what's needed in particular trades, right? Being able to get the education where and when you need it so that you have job readiness is critically important. Making sure that we're actually investing and producing more in Canada rather than just shipping raw materials out. Critically important. We need to get back to that. We need a strong and robust public service that all of us can rely on. I mean, folks, we have an aging population. We have a healthcare crisis in this country. We need to be able to actually address those particular issues. We have an education crisis in this country. Every kid deserves to have a good education. And that means having good, staffing ratios in the education system, right? And again, making it easier for workers to join unions is absolutely critical, and that means we have to consistently be meeting workers where they are at and speaking to workers at all times about why this is such a priority.
Merci, Jen. Ben, écoutez, c'est pas compliqué, hein? C'est solidarité, solidarité, solidarité. Vous savez, les syndicats, on nous demande comment on peut faire pour changer l'avenir. Ben, il faut aussi travailler différemment. Il faut être capable de parler à nos membres. Il faut être capable d'influencer nos membres pour qu'ils fassent des choix politiques qui soient là pour eux. On voit une montée de la droite au Canada et partout dans le monde. Il y a une déconnexion entre les représentants syndicaux dont on fait partie et les travailleurs, travailleuses. On a des membres actuellement qui votent pour des partis qui sont là pour les étouffer, pour des partis qui sont là pour travailler pour le 1 % de riches. Dans des crises comme ceux-là, il faut être capable de travailler tout le monde ensemble, tout le monde syndical ensemble. Il faut changer cette perception de bien des gens, et sûrement des gens aussi dans la salle, que les syndicats, on est là pour, et on nuit à la productivité, on nuit à l'efficacité, on garde en place des travailleurs qui ne méritent pas d'avoir des jobs. Il faut changer cette perception-là. Il faut être capable d'être là pour le vrai monde, d'expliquer ce qu'on fait. Il faut se remettre en question rapidement. Et pour ça, c'est un travail d'équipe. Il faut que tous les syndicats, tous les noms qu'on porte, la crise, le travailleur est plus important que le nom qu'on porte. Donc, il faut travailler ensemble. Il faut changer cette image-là. Il faut être capable de revenir à nos lettres de noblesse, à quoi on sert vraiment, revenir à la base, être là sur le terrain partout et s'assurer que notre éducation, notre message à nos membres soit tellement puissant qu'ils recommencent à voter pour des gouvernements progressistes qui vont être là pour le vrai monde.
Je pense que c'est un bon slogan pour un T-shirt. La solidarité, c'est un sport d'équipe.
Exactement.
So, last question. It's really about what can we do? It's about mobilization. Over to you, Bea. You can take first crack. Knowing what's at stake, how is the labor movement moving forward from reacting to the economic changes to shaping what comes next? It is difficult if we're reacting based on a tweet here, a tweet there, one day something else. How do we move towards shaping the future? And what does mobilizing workers and the public, what does that look like now in these times?
Yeah, listen, it's hard to mobilize people. Everybody is so busy. Everybody is inundated. Many people are working 2 or 3 different jobs. They have family responsibilities. Grabbing people's attention is hard at any time. But in the labor movement, we know that we only get success when we have collective action, when we can bring people together to rally around the cause to actually be able to move the needle forward. And so that is what we have to continue to do. And that means having often difficult conversations. And difficult conversations can't just happen internally when we go to bargaining tables, when we're getting ready to face down an employer. We have to see the current economic climate in that exact same way. Workers have to shape what comes next, and that means that workers have to rally together. So at the CLC and with all of our union partners, we're working really hard at making sure that we are putting those messages out so that people can easily understand what is shaping the current economic reality that we are in and what the solutions are that we need to see and how they can see themselves reflected and be part of that change. And that is an ongoing issue. We're also asking parliamentarians to sign a workers' pledge, to be more transparent about how they're making decisions that are shaping workers' lives. Workers need to be able to hold their members of parliament and any elected official accountable for what they are doing. And too often, folks that are elected to do the right things don't do the right things and they get away with it. That has got to stop. We need to hold everyone accountable for the kind of Canada that we want to live in.
Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, as Bea said, mobilizing people is tough. People wake up, they just read the internet, and they're scared, they're nervous, right? So mobilizing starts with an exchange of ideas and knowledge that can help us shape a more just society. We got to use areas where we can leverage shared responsibility between unions, government, businesses, and find solutions that are mutually beneficial for all. As long as we see each other as adversaries, we're going to undermine the potential to bring positive change for Canadians, right? Business needs a dedicated, motivated, and skilled workforce. Unions want to promote healthy and safe workplaces where people are rewarded with fair wages, fair benefits, and long-term job security. And government, they want a workforce that's an inclusive society that helps make Canada the world-class country that it is. Sometimes it seems like labor and business are used as pawns for people in the government, right? We need to work together. As we face economic threats from outside, we need to come together on the core principles, the things that make us all happy and excited to be Canadians.
Yeah. Et Magali.
La mobilisation, c'est la clé. C'est la clé. On a lancé au Québec, le 31 mars 2025, les États généraux du syndicalisme. Okay. Ça, ce sont tous les centrales syndicales au Québec et les syndicats privés, tout le monde ensemble, on s'assoit autour d'une même table, on consulte bien sûr nos travailleurs, ça c'est près de 1,7 million de travailleurs et travailleuses au Québec, tout le monde ensemble, les groupes communautaires, les conseils du patronat, les chambres de commerce. On a besoin de comprendre ce qui se passe sur le terrain. On a besoin de se remettre en question. On ne peut pas juste continuer de travailler de la même façon parce qu'on le voit, mes collègues en ont parlé, les gens vont chercher l'information sur les médias sociaux, tout le monde est débordé, ça va rapidement. On a comme perdu ce sentiment-là que moi, je peux faire une différence. C'est de faire comprendre à nos gens qu'individuellement, chacun décide de ce qui va se passer dans le futur. Mais tout ça, il faut le faire ensemble. Alors, on a vraiment ce grand besoin de revoir nos pratiques, d'entendre les messages qui nous viennent, d'être capable de s'adapter, mais d'être partout. On a réussi, on a négocié en front commun, les centrales syndicales, envers le gouvernement du Québec lors de la négociation il y a 2 ans. On a réussi à rassembler 115 000 militants dans la rue pour une grande manifestation. Ça, c'est monsieur, madame, tout le monde qui était présent à Montréal, 115 000 personnes. Pour y arriver, alors qu'on entend de plus en plus que c'est difficile de mobiliser les gens, on est plus individualiste, on n'a pas le temps, bien, on a été partout. On était sur toutes les tribunes. On a les médias sociaux, les médias traditionnels, les rencontres de cuisine. Dans chacune des régions du Québec, il faut être sur le terrain. Il n'y a pas d'autre solution. Lorsqu'on parle à notre monde, ils sont là, ils sont au rendez-vous, et c'est comme ça qu'on va y arriver. Et honnêtement, j'aimerais ça qu'on soit aussi capable, et je parle à nos collègues qui ont des syndicats internationaux, qui sont aux États-Unis également. Il faut que les Américains se réveillent aussi. Il faut qu'il se passe quelque chose. Il faut que les gens prennent la rue. C'est indissociable. Il faut absolument briser ce mouvement-là. Absolument. Il faut arrêter d'avoir peur. On a peur et on a raison d'avoir peur. Mais si on reste chacun chez nous, on ne peut pas imaginer ce qui va se passer dans 10 ans. Honnêtement, il faut absolument... Ça va passer par la mobilisation. C'est le peuple qui va décider. Et ça, ben nous, les syndicats, ça fait partie de notre mission de justice sociale de faire ce travail-là.
Oh mon Dieu. Well, c'est ça, on a terminé nos questions qui sont préparées et je veux remercier. I want to thank you, Barry, Bea, and Magali. This was fantastic, and it's so true. If we just stay home, we will lose it all. Si on reste chez nous, on va perdre chez nous. So, what a call to arms. Thank you so much for joining us.
Merci tout le monde.
That was Bea Bruske, Barry Sawyer, and Magali Picard, speaking with Jen Hassum about Canada's economic future, recorded on March 5th at the Broadbent Institute's 2026 Progress Summit. And if you liked this panel discussion, share and subscribe to Perspectives, a Canadian journal of political economy and social democracy on all major podcast platforms, as well as Press Progress's award-winning Sources podcast that digs deeper into the news stories you won't find in the major papers. The Perspectives Journal podcast and Sources are proud members of the Harbinger Media Network, Canada's progressive podcast community. You can read more in Perspectives Journal, a publication of the Broadbent Institute, by visiting perspectivesjournal.ca, and get more from the Broadbent Institute by subscribing to our mailing list at broadbentinstitute.ca/subscribe.